April, May 2021 onwards. In spite of this large influx, not counting the number of people who have been here for decades and some of whom still do not have documentation or legal sort of status in Pakistan, in spite of this presence, the Pakistan government still does not have a policy on how to deal with migrants in general, or what to do when people come in as refugees, or when they approach international agencies for refugee status determination. So the Pakistan government is sort of letting things continue in limbo. And this has been going on for a long time. Pakistan is not a signatory to the UN Convention on Refugees or to the Protocol of 1967. And at the same time, there's no domestic policy either. So anybody who enters Pakistan illegally is subject to the Foreigners Act of 1946, under which you can be prosecuted for entering the country without proper documentation. In practice, that rarely happens, but there is just this ongoing limbo with a large migrant population, many of whom are undocumented, and there's basically no formal way to deal with this issue. So what can we get to the last slide, please? That was it. Okay, so basically our research focuses on the legal issues, which we've gone into some detail, that what are the what are the options for people who have entered Pakistan, and there are basically not many. You either keep getting your visas renewed if you do have a visa, or you simply try and acquire a Pakistani CNIC, which has been quite a scandal in the last few years. NADRA started cracking down around 2017-18 through the computerized national identity cards, checking up on people, and there were many cases of people, particularly in KP and Balochistan, whose fathers and grandfathers have been here for a long time. Even their CNICs were blocked, but that was a retroactive sort of act. In practice, there is no policy on how to deal with migrants. There is no policy on what to do with people who have crossed the border and are here and are now looking for ways to survive. To the best of our knowledge, Pakistan has not practiced large-scale forced repatriation. This would be against international law, and we do know that there have been cases of repatriation. We've been told informally where people have been sent across the border, sort of against their will. But this has not happened on a large scale. Pakistan has been careful about that. But at the same time, this situation of uncertainty has now continued for some time. In a larger context, this doesn't just, although our research focuses on Afghans, but this doesn't just apply to Afghans. It also applies to people like Bangladeshis and Burmese who are living in Karachi. Again, a large undocumented population that the country has no policy on how to deal with. Our research has also looked at access to health and education, particularly for Afghans. Again, there are many complications. People who do not have documentation, it is extremely difficult for children to, well, it depends very much on individual school heads. Children sometimes can get into government schools quite easily, but when it comes to taking exams and so on, that becomes impossible if you don't have documentation. Access to health used to be relatively easy. And there were special clinics and hospitals catering to the Afghan population, also staffed by Afghan doctors. That has started changing in recent years as the security forces have started, clamping down and demanding documentation. So this is becoming ever more complex as a large undocumented population is now living in the country with difficulties in access to basic services, difficulties in access to income earning opportunities, and essentially no way of protecting themselves from law enforcement or other antisocial elements who want to harass them. So what we are advocating for is for Pakistan to look at this issue in a holistic manner, to formulate a policy, and then to actually implement some sort of policy directive to either, provide a long-term path to citizenship, or at least ensure access to basic facilities. That is basically what our research is on, and that is basically what we would like to discuss in this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophia. Now I'd like to come to our we'll start with you, obviously. Sir, this problem is going on for the last almost 40-50 years, and our state doesn't have a proper policy response to it. हम कहाँ पे गलत जा रहे हैं? स्टेट में क्लैरिटी नहीं है, या फैसला साजी कुवत नहीं है, या ये हमारे लिए कंसर्न ही नहीं है सच? जी जी सर, प्लीज.
Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, I must thank SDPI at the very outset for organizing this important conference on refugees. I think it's one of the very important problems faced by our country for the last more than 4 decades. Actually, Pakistan had faced this problem right after partition of India, when millions of immigrants came from Indian part of the subcontinent to Pakistan. We also had refugees from Bangladesh, Burma, and other places. They were mostly economic refugees, mostly settled in Karachi and other parts of Sindh. But the most important refugee problem started in 1980s after war in Afghanistan. It's a very large-scale problem, and it has continued up till this day. By and large, people of Pakistan have shown tolerance and empathy towards refugees. And it's really a record that such a huge refugee population has lived in Pakistan for such a long time. And there have not been the type of conflicts that we see in other parts of the world. I think the credit goes to people of Pakistan who have really shown great sympathy to the miseries and difficulties of refugees coming from Afghanistan. But unfortunately, this problem has continued because conflict in Afghanistan has not come to a closure. There have been different stages, and whenever there is new civil war or new foreign invasion of Afghanistan, we see new influxes of refugees, and they're mostly, they come to Pakistan for historical reasons because of our geography, history, culture, and ethnic links, other links. So they come to Pakistan. Now, there are certain challenges of this refugee problem that we need to discuss and we need to keep in mind while discussing this problem. First of all, Pakistan is not signatory to international conventions. There's a legal vacuum. Pakistan is not signatory to 1951 Geneva Convention. Pakistan is not signatory to 1967 Protocol. And above that, we also have a problem internally because we don't have a law dealing with refugees. There's no legislation dealing with refugees specifically. So the problem has been dealt on the basis of political expediencies and Pakistan's policy towards Afghanistan, not according to international conventions or our own legislation. So this is a major challenge, and it has really not been addressed so far. I worked in Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, and I was in the Senate Committee of Human Rights, and we raised this question time and again, but unfortunately, no government was prepared to accede to international conventions on refugees. Apart from that, there are other aspects to this. You see, these refugees were not just people who had to leave their home and hearth, who had to leave their homes and their villages, but they were also caught in a military conflict. So when they came here, they were sort of given assistance by international community in general and Pakistan in particular, but it was not, the assistance was not just for their sustenance or their survival or their life in Pakistan, but they were sent back to fight in Afghanistan. And they became cannon fodder in a war between big powers, because US wanted to avenge its defeat in Vietnam, and they had problem with the Soviet Union. So these Afghan refugees became cannon fodder. There's a very interesting book by Dr. Fazl Rahim Marwat, a professor now retired from Peshawar University. He wrote this book in 2003. The title of the book is From Mahajir to Mujahid. From Mahajir to Mujahid. You can find it on the Google, the soft copy of it. So it gives the details of this aspect of refugee problem, because as you know, in 1980s, when the war started, Nebraska University prepared syllabus for these refugee schools, which, of course, this was a very dangerous development, because this syllabus was also injected into our national syllabus, which is the main source of extremism in our country. As if it was not enough, we saw the arrival of religious seminaries, thousands of them, supported financially by Western countries, US, UK, and also Arab countries. And now these seminaries are there, unreformed, and some of them are not even registered. So this is also one aspect of this refugee problems. Apart from that, we also have, of course, the arrival of such huge population burdened our civil amenities. Local populations also had problems, particularly in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan, that were closer to Afghanistan geographically and ethnically. Of course, people of these areas were closer to people in Afghanistan, and so most of the refugees settled in these areas. But Karachi and Quetta and other places also felt the impact, and the host communities have problems, particularly in Balochistan and in Sindh. There is the delicate and sensitive question of demographic balances, where the local populations sometimes feel that the balances are changing against them. So we also have to take that into account. Apart from that, as I said earlier, the problem has not come to a closure. So normally, even after such a long time, one would have expected that this problem will be resolved finally, as it is done in other places in the world. Normally, there are three aspects of final solution of refugee problems. First is, of course, first and foremost is repatriation. Repatriation is supposed to be done voluntarily, without pressure, and those who choose to go back to their homeland, go back and get resettled in their own countries. This is the major part normally of the refugee problem. The second is relocation. Those of refugees who cannot go back to their countries are relocated in other parts of the world. And the third problem is, of course, the absorption in local communities. In Pakistan, this problem of repatriation has occurred more than once. It actually has been going on. It's an ongoing project. They go to Afghanistan, but when there are new conflicts, they come back. And for Pakistan, it's very complicated, because Pakistan is deeply involved in Afghan conflict. And unfortunately, Pakistan has its allies. Some are more allied to Pakistan than others. Like Hikmatyar's party, Hizb Islami in the past, and Taliban from the last almost 3 decades. So their closure and their supporters find better access to authorities in Pakistan. So that is also a complicating factor. Because these refugees are not dealt equally. There are also political discrimination. Those who are closer to Pakistan's political alliances are given priority. There are also problems of international protection. I think ICRC, unfortunately, has not been able to consistently protect these refugees. And as I said, they also look towards Pakistani state policy, and they deal refugees according to policy. For example, these most recent arrivals from Afghanistan, they're not being recognized as refugees. There are other terms you see in our country. We sometimes reinvent terminologies for the purpose of diverting or spinning, giving it a spin. For example, IDPs, internally displaced persons in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in the last 2 decades, they were called temporarily displaced person, TDCs, TDPs. IDPs were called TDPs. I was joking with someone, I said, let's call these refugees as tourists, so that may change their status. But unfortunately, these Afghan new arrivals are sometimes called IDPs. Sometimes they're called, I don't know, they're called in different ways, but they're not being recognized as refugees. And I can tell you, they are going through great miseries and really great frustration. The way they are stopped at the borders, at the gates, the way they are fleeced, the way they are sent back. Many of them are sent back to Taliban regime where they are not dealt very humanely. So I think the ICRC, unfortunately, has not been able to address these issues. And our media is also not raising these issues. And as I said, the state policy is, since Pakistani government wants to have best of relations with Taliban, so they don't raise these problems faced by refugees because they don't want to antagonize new Taliban authorities. So these are some of the issues. I think it's very important for Pakistan to accede to international conventions. A country with such a prolonged and large-scale problem of refugees, how can it afford to not to be a signatory to international conventions? Similarly, we must have internal law. We should deal refugees according to some legal structure, because they are at the mercy of our police and other authorities who really sometimes deal with them in a very, very inhuman way. So this is the most important thing, to fill this legal vacuum. Secondly, I think finally we also have to reconsider, Pakistan has to revisit its Afghan policy, because war in Afghanistan is the source of these refugees. And unfortunately, our country's Afghan policy has also been a factor in prolonging this war. I think we should help Afghans in establishing peace in their country, so that they don't have to leave their country and they settle in their own country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Aisha, if we could ask you for your initial comments, please.
economist and having been part of the development sector for more than 25 years, at the risk of admitting my age, don't calculate my age, but you know, we have been working for the betterment of the Afghan refugee population, you know, with a sustainable development lens. Unfortunately, the visibility of Pakistan's and its stakeholders and provincial governments is not acknowledged as it can be. I feel that. The funding to UNHCR, of course, by governments has to be split. We have new refugee issues such as Syria and others. So I think the global community, I start from that, needs to follow through on its own initiatives and commitments that it has made to host countries. My second point was causes of war, refugee problem around the world, and particularly in Pakistan. One, of course, is conflict, war, and I won't go into that. But another is natural disaster. So displacement that occurs within Pakistan is due to climate-related natural disasters, as we see in the floods over here. And of course, these natural disasters then further aggravate or exacerbate the vulnerability of such populations such as the Afghan refugees. Again, I would agree to what has been said, that we don't have policies, systems, or just simple management mechanisms to deal with the refugee population, to facilitate, we are certainly not members, we're not signatories to the Geneva Convention. I think it was 1967. But we are signatories to other conventions that support, you know, states facilitating human rights, just basic human rights of individuals that are within their country and land. And those basic human rights are access to, you know, to a physically safe and secure environment, access to, you know, basic amenities such as food, having a minimum of food security, water, hygiene, etc. These things are not very costly and not very difficult. It requires management or good governance. I don't want to go into jargonism, but it does require governance. The first point that I had mentioned was citizenship. Actually, I think most of us don't know, Pakistan has a Citizens Act of 1951. So actually, although we gained independence in 47, we became practically truly independent in, I think it was 1951. And April 13th, 1951, the Citizens Act came into force. And according to that act, anyone born in Pakistan or choosing can be a naturalized citizen within the territory of the current Pakistan. Now, unfortunately, this does not apply to, I mean, so if you look at it and something that, you know, Safia, you may want to research and explore, and we can lobby for, is that the refugees, many refugees now have been born in this country and are educated in our universities, especially I know of KP very well. And by law, they are actually naturalized citizens if they so choose. So there's another law that says, if you don't wish to become a citizen of Pakistan, then if you're 18 years old, then you can say you don't want to be a citizen of Pakistan. So many Afghan refugees do not wish to become or naturalized citizens, but there are many that do. So most of us And even those who, the law enforcement agencies or law enforcers in Pakistan, many people, they don't have the capacities. They are unaware of the policies. What little policies are there on the ground? How do they apply? How does it work? There are provincial level, there are policies or there are practices of a particular regime. Unfortunately, you know, the local government is unaware of this. So there is a fair amount of capacity building that is required for provincial and local governments. The laws that exist, they need to be translated, maybe again, making a final decision of the policy. One regime, one government says that, as Safia said, that the Foreign Office said that this is the official policy, but this is how the credibility of and legitimacy of our government is also at question, because they say one thing and another thing is in practice. So imagine if as citizens we are confused about laws and policies, what do the refugees feel? Then another acknowledgement that is missing, not just by the international community, but also by our own government, is the host communities and their role in facilitating and supporting. Most of the time they are supportive, other times they feel, because Afghans, I feel what I have observed, the Afghan refugees, they're very entrepreneurial, very capable people, even those who have not had formal education. And so local communities over a longer period of time, they often feel threatened. Most wars or conflict often have, you know, if one, I'm a bit of a pragmatist and I feel there's an economic basis of most of the, you know, the issues that we face. So host communities are often challenged. Another major challenge is sustainable development, the environment. Our own people, our own communities need to be more, you know, there's more awareness and regarding environmental damage, how we manage our resources. But naturally, when refugees come, and there has been since 2021, there has been a 3.46% of influx, according to you know, UN figures. So with that influx, naturally, there is more of a burden on the environment. And then, of course, there are you know, climate-induced issues. Thank you very much for listening. Just to conclude, I feel I congratulate SDPI for you know, their conference overall that they hold every year. It's brilliant, and for this particular session, it's a very critical topic, I feel, for the global community as well as us in Pakistan, because there are two very essential aspects to it. One is about social harmony, and the other is about economics. And of course, then, you know, it leads to kind of the whole global sustainable development goals and its implications for very critical SDGs. So what I shared with you, one was about citizenship. Everyone has a right to citizenship that is identified in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Citizenship is a legal relationship with the state. If refugees have been here for 40 years, I think the former Prime Minister had given space for naturalization for those who wish to be. So we do have a law, the 1951 Act. There are some policies, there are some statements. The government, our government certainly needs to take a clear and firm position on that. The global community and Pakistan and the youth, especially in Pakistan, we need to discuss the white elephant in the room about the causes of refugee situation and the refugee crisis worldwide, and especially in our country, which is conflict, which is also climate disaster. I mean, the US still doesn't sign to, the climate conventions and protocols. The third thing that I mentioned was that there is a platform, a solution strategy for Afghan refugees. When we speak of Afghan refugees specifically, where the international community has created a framework to take the responsibility, take some burden off, both for host community, for the host country, as well as for the refugee. So we need to move that along further in a very proactive and amicable manner. So thank you very much. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kashif Saab. If you could give initial comments, then we'll go to the questions from the audience.
A lot more has been discussed, and after Safia Saiba and Afrasiab Khattak and Aisha Khan, they talk about the historical perspective and the current situation and the climate change and the refugee crisis. Actually, this is very challenging to talk further. But however, while working on the climate-induced migrants and the persons who are displaced internally due to the floods, and understanding their miseries, the concerns of their women, their health issues, their parda issues, and the nutrition of their children, one can just imagine that how the entire nation, when they displaced from their own country, entire nation is on exile actually. So what happened to them? That you can just imagine it. So few weeks back, actually I was looking on social media. There's a Ukrainian refugee in some suburb of country. So there is a queue on water. So the woman is holding a can and they're looking for the water. So one reporter asked him that what you did in Ukraine. So he just told him that few weeks back, he's just a professor and he has a class of 200 people and he's writing, he has a laptop, he has office and all these steps. And suddenly I'm in this kilo. So and she says, start crying. So you just imagine what happened in 40 years back. The Afghans who 85% who have the agriculture background, who have the lands, and at once they have to leave their lands and then they come to Pakistan, and in Pakistan they have no land. And they have to live that they didn't live before. And their means of production is no more with them. So their pride, their social structure, which is bounded around the land, there is no more. And then their identification, their social power, hierarchy, whatever, the whole social fabric has declined. So just so the Afghan Muhajirin, if I can imagine, because I was born during this crisis and then raised, and then I'm getting older in this crisis, just like as I've told us, this is historical perspective, but this problem is not, we are not getting out of it. So I just giving the sociological perspective that what people of psychological perspective, that what people actually think when they migrated, what depression and the stress in their mind, and what is the outcome actually. The question is that because the recent crisis actually lie with that historical structural perspective within that. And you know that we start calling them Afghan refugees, just like we are saying, and the convention is also, UN convention is also called them Afghan refugees, but there is also a term Afghan brotherhood. So there is need to bring some space for the Afghan refugees or Afghan nation that is migrating or displaced to Pakistan. So within their tribal setup, tribal Pakhtunwali tribe, they try to get the space for them. So we can see that they can heard as the Afghan brothers coming from Afghanistan because of this war. So there is another term which Afrasiab Khattak also mentioned, is the Afghan Muhajirin. This is another term we heard in our youth that these are Afghan Muhajirin, so they get wider space among the community in Pakistan beyond Pakhtuns and beyond. So that's how the spaces are created within the perspective of Islamic teachings and all these stuff. So in this perspective, when these Afghan Muhajirin came into Pakistan, so I heard the stories. I remember that, and I saw in the Pakistan television when they broadcasted that these Afghan Muhajirins, the landlords, the people who have the land, the farmer with the pride, actually, they just stand in the queue for the food, for the water, and they stamp what they are receiving there. So the dilemma or the thinking, one can imagine that. One can imagine that during the earthquake and during the floods, when the people have the land and have the houses, beautiful houses and cattle and livestock, and suddenly they are in a queue. So one can imagine the stress. So this is how that generation feel that stress, and that stress or dilemma passed into the next generations that born in Pakistan. So that stress or depression actually trigger many different aspects, which is actually many researchers have handled that aspect too, but still there is very detailed research is required that what has happened. And so next step actually is related to the stress among Pakistanis, as Priyasab also mentioned that. So people start thinking that it is too much, people are too much, and they are living too long. So how long we can support them? So this is one of the people Pakistan start thinking about that. Just like the flood, because I work with the flood factories, and I know that in the initial period of time, there is a whole support from the community, and gradually it's declined, and after 2 or 3 months that the factories are with Allah alone. So that's happened with gradually, and the people and the farm Muhajirin then impact on the labor markets and employment. And there are the studies that they impact the environmental aspect, that they cut the forest and degrade the land. So these are the aspects that people of Pakistan start thinking, and the doors which are open, they're not start closing down. Also, that's where the problem starts actually. And meantime, when there is a second generation of Afghan refugees, there is a transnational phenomena emerging with them, moving back and forth to Afghanistan and Pakistan, starting businesses, developing relationships, social networks. So benefiting from Pakistan and also benefiting from their social relationship or kinship relationship from Afghanistan. These Afghan refugees develop some well-being, prosperity with them. But in the meantime, there is the concerns within the Pakistan, the voices are raised that these trade or the transnationalism movements in Pakistan actually causing illegal drugs and weapon trade. So and heroin, these are the hallmarks of the 90s and 20s. We listened that these Afghan Muhajirin, because of these Afghan Muhajirin, these are coming into the Pakistan. Whole society of fabric of Pakistan is shattering. So what actually the way forward, I think, is that the stress is not alone. The Afghan migrant can handle it, not alone Pakistan try to handle. So there is need to rethink the policy perspective, because I think as a migrant researcher that these Afghan Muhajirin that are settled here and they are not returned back, because from 2002 to 2020, about 2 million or 3 million people, 2 million people have returned back, but still 3 million is in Pakistan. So my being living in Punjab and as a Punjabi, and I am in Faisalabad, met many Afghanis are working there, and they are so much integrated in the society. They are developed the whole markets and the businesses over there. So I think it's very difficult to agree them on to return back. So there should be some policy interventions that to integrate them into the Pakistani society, so that the apprehensions should be removed, but we can frequently see in our society. So right now I stop here, and then I will discuss the SDPI study on with in collaboration FES, that what happened currently, the situation about the education and health perspective, or housing problems with the Afghan refugees. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comments, sir. Now we'll move on to questions. आप लोग कोई सवाल पूछना चाहें, any language you're comfortable in, so please raise your hands and we'll pass the mic to you. Or please, if you have any questions on the Afghan refugee issue, the crisis in Pakistan, इस पे कोई सवाल आप लोगों का है, so we'll more than happy to answer it. चलिए, I'll take this opportunity to ask my own question. पाकिस्तान में एक मसला ये रहा है कि this should have been a humanitarian issue. Afghans coming into Pakistan, people displaced because of war, रोजगार नहीं था, livelihood opportunities खत्म हो गई, अफगानिस्तान से पाकिस्तान आए. हमने इसको somehow एक security और political issue बना दिया. How did we move from a humanitarian angle to viewing everything from to a security angle? Because हम भी जब भी government से बात करते हैं, whenever we talk to the government servants या security agencies, they see it as a national security issue, not as a humanitarian issue. अगर एक बच्ची स्कूल नहीं जा रही, आप उसको एक security angle से कैसे देख सकते हैं? And हम as a state यहाँ कैसे पहुंच गए कि हम हर चीज को एक security lens लगा देते हैं?
Cool, I agree with that. अफगानिस्तान को मोस्टली सिक्योरिटी प्रिज्म से देखा गया है. अफगानिस्तान हैज बीन लुक्ड एट थ्रू सिक्योरिटी प्रिज्म. वो जो ह्यूमैनिटेरियन प्रिज्म है वो बहुत कम है. इट्स वेरी रेयर, वेरी लिमिटेड अनफॉर्चुनेटली. और उसकी वजह ये है कि जो अफगानिस्तान का इशू है वो बड़ी ताकतों के लिए एक तरह से सिक्योरिटी इशू है, और उन्होंने एक दूसरे के खिलाफ अफगान सिचुएशन को इस्तेमाल करने की कोशिश की है. तो वो जो कहते थे ना कि some of the big powers were supposed to be fighting in Afghanistan till the last Afghan. उनका their purpose was fighting, not really. It was not about Afghans. It was about their fighting. So unfortunately, अभी भी अब देखें ना, जब भी अफगानिस्तान के बारे में मीटिंग होती है, अभी पिछले एक साल में आपने देखा है, तो मीटिंग अक्सर वक्त है नेशनल सिक्योरिटी एडवाइजर्स की मीटिंग है, नेशनल सिक्योरिटी या जासूसी इदारों की मीटिंग है, क्योंकि वो मेनली वो सिक्योरिटी प्रॉब्लम. लेकिन जैसे आपने बिल्कुल ठीक कहा कि मिलियनों लोग देखे ना, जैसे हमारे एक दोस्त ने कहा भी कि इट्स अ नेशन इन एग्जाइल. अब प्रैक्टिकली फॉर ऑल प्रैक्टिकल पर्पसेस अफगान नेशन इज इन एग्जाइल. तो ये ह्यूमैनिटेरियन प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, तो उसको एड्रेस करने की ज़रूरत है. और ये जो सिक्योरिटी वाला बिग पावर्स वाला, यानी अमेरिका ने रूस के खिलाफ इस्तेमाल किया, रूस और दूसरे मुल्कों ने अमेरिका के खिलाफ इस्तेमाल किया, अभी चीन के खिलाफ इस्तेमाल करना चाहते हैं. आई मीन इस प्रिज्म से देखने के बजाय दे आर ह्यूमन बीइंग, इंसान हैं. और हम ये भी दावा करते हैं मुसलमान हैं. भाई अब वो ऐसे वक्त में हमारा इस्लामी भाईचारा भी गुम हो जाता है. कम से कम उनको उसको देखने की ज़रूरत है. और मेरे ख्याल में पाकिस्तान के लिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है कि वहाँ पे एक सेटलमेंट आए और एक आबाद हो अफगानिस्तान. तो पाकिस्तान के लिए भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. ये पाकिस्तान के लिए बहुत दूर का प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, ये किसी अफ्रीका में या किसी लैटिन अमेरिका का प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. इट्स इन आवर नेबरहुड एंड इट विल सॉर्ट ऑफ मैटर अ लॉट फॉर पाकिस्तान स्टेबिलिटी, प्रोग्रेस और हार्मनी के अफगानिस्तान के अंदर ये चीजें हल हों. थैंक यू वेरी मच.
Jamal, I beg to differ a little, sir, आपसे. आपने कहा हर चीज पॉलिटिकल इशू होता है. पॉलिटिकल क्या है? ह्यूमैनिटेरियन क्राइसिस भी पॉलिटिक्स की वजह से बनी है. आई एग्री दैट वी नीड टू लुक एट जो एक रेफ्यूजी प्रॉब्लम जो है, रेफ्यूजीज यहाँ आए हैं, तो जब होस्ट कंट्री में होते तो ह्यूमैनिटेरियन बेसिस पे देखना चाहिए सारे मुल्कों को. But we cannot ignore the political dimension to it. What is politics? It's power play होता है ना. Influence आप सियासत जो है हर चीज में होती है, इदारों में होती है, इकोनॉमिक्स के लिए होती है, पैसों के लिए होती है. हम मुसलमान ही भूल जाते हैं पैसों के लिए. So I think if maybe we are not coming to a solution because we do not acknowledge the politics of the changes that are taking place in the world. I mean, even climate change decisions. I mean, you would think as a scientist or as youngsters or students that governments would be able to decide and take the right policy steps for reducing the greenhouse gases and the emissions or whatever. But politics comes into play. इसी तरह refugees, like I mentioned, कि एक white elephant को जो ये इतना जो जंग हो रहा है, why with all the knowledge and the wisdom and the technology, for me, has conflict increased or enhanced? I think there are less proactive measures in this century or in the last 30 decades towards peace and conflict resolution or diplomatic approaches and solutions for addressing the world issues. And among these issues, I mean, if we look at global trends, the refugee situation, refugee crisis has increased. And I'm sorry to say, this is all political. Majority for me, the causes for the refugee crisis and for the platforms that development people solutions that development professionals come up with, it's politics that prevents solutions. So sorry, that it's a rather strong take, but that's my take.
Sorry, political angle, I absolutely understand, and I actually agree with you. लेकिन पाकिस्तान में एक इशू ये रहा है, especially जो young
और
बच्चे
sorry जमाल, जब तक हम इसको acknowledge नहीं करते तो हल नहीं आएगा.
हमारे यहाँ पे हर चीज को एक सिक्योरिटी मैटर बना दिया जाता है. मिसाल के तौर पे लास्ट टाइम आपको याद होगा शायद कराची में प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने अनाउंस किया था कि we might grant citizenship to Afghans when Imran Khan initially came into power, and he was completely vetoed by the military establishment. कि nothing doing, not at all. और पाकिस्तान में 2-4 मिथ्स भी हैं जो शायद हम बड़े होते सुनी थी हमने. हमें पहले बताया गया कि पाकिस्तान में क्राइम इज बिकॉज ऑफ अफगान्स, पाकिस्तान में टेररिज्म इज बिकॉज ऑफ अफगान्स. फिर हमें बताया गया जी कि हमारे रिसोर्सेज पे वो कैप्चर कर रहे हैं आके. फिर मैंने किसी से पूछा, आपको स्टेट देती क्या है? क्या आपको फ्री हेल्थ मिलती है? क्या आपको फ्री एजुकेशन मिलती है? क्या आपको कोई एक रोड सीधी मिलती है? तो हाउ आर दे कैप्चरिंग योर रिसोर्सेज? पाकिस्तान में एक थोड़ा सा एक नेगेटिव स्टीरियोटाइप अफगान्स को किया गया ओवर टाइम, और हमें भी बताया गया, स्पेशली इन पंजाब में, केपी साइड पे शायद नहीं ये इतना ना हो. वी ग्रोइंग अप इन पिंडी एंड इस्लामाबाद एंड पंजाब के एरियाज में, वी वर टोल्ड के पाकिस्तान का प्रॉब्लम इज अफगान्स, which eventually when we grew up we realized that it was something which the security establishment kind of fed into people's mind. उसका reality से दूर तक उतारी था. Sorry, मेरा ज़्यादा point was on the security lens as opposed to political. I agree with you. Absolutely, every problem has a political dimension. Every issue has a political dimension. Security lens के ऊपर मैं ज़्यादा focus.
मैं जमाल आपको थोड़ा सा background बताता हूँ कि ये प्रॉब्लम क्यों आता है, सिक्योरिटी कंसर्न्स को और उसको एक अफगान रेफ्यूजीज को एक थ्रेट के तौर पे क्यों लेते हैं. Afghan refugees, of course, they are in minority, and minority जो है always have a strong social network, strong binding force. They have strong sense of organization. So जो ये sense of organization है, जब ये business में आती है, मैंने खुद इसको फैसलाबाद और लाहौर में देखा है कि जहाँ पे ये अफगान महाजरीन आए हैं, जो business establish किया है, so they always favor their own and they always get their problem solved or whatever. They move and they work in a social network, in a network. So that actually gives some insecurity situations among the businessmen. I feel in Faisalabad, the Afghan refugees, they are mostly used वो जो मिट्टी भरने का काम जो होता है ना बुनियादों में, सारा का सारा उन्हीं के पास था. No one can enter. if someone enter, so they will die. वो क्या कहते हैं उनसे resist करते थे इसको. तो इस तरह की बहुत सारी ऐसी stories हैं जिसकी वजह से ये concern बना है. तो इसको of course इसको जैसे आप एक इसकी example के तौर पे आप इसको देख सकते हैं. Still we consider that the rural to urban migration is a curse, is a problem. Rather than my research and other many researchers show that this is actually the tool for the people living in rural areas to get some well-being, some perspective. So even the poor, rural poor, when migrated to the urban area and still is urban poor, still is better off than while he was in the village. So in a sense, but no one considers, still in our policies, it is considered that it's a bad thing. It's bad for urban development and it's urbanization issues. So this is similar mindset is there with the Afghan refugees. So to settle them in the society because they are already integrated into society. So we need to consider them to integrate in our society. Thank you very much.
Sorry, the questions, it's still open for comments and questions. If anyone has any comments, we can start with Arif Azad Sahab, then ma'am, you, then sir, and then the gentleman at the back, please. Arif Azad Sahab, please. सबसे पहले आगे देखिए.
Yes, I mean, thank you very much for organizing, such enlightening sessions. And just I have, a few comments to make. One about Jamal, your observations that when you were growing up in Pindi, and I mean, images about the refugees and others. This is actually, worldwide problem. Like, negative, stereotyping around refugees, making them other. And of course, creating divisions between the local and the outsiders as a part of politics. Although, like in the Western country, this is very, pronounced. And of course, the far right plays upon these, the images. But in Pakistan, I think it is, less, pronounced. But it is, global problem. Yes, my second comment is about, because the refugees have been here for the last, 40 years, and we have not been able to, document our experience, and of course, to showcase our, good management of the, refugee problem to the outside world. I mean, if you read like the refugee, literature all over the world, I mean, you get very few cases of Pakistan, how Pakistan did manage these things. And if you read literature, other thing that, comes up, that Pakistan is among one of the few countries who hosts, largest population of the refugees on its soil. And I mean, this we have been doing for the last, 40, 50 years. But we haven't really, documented. Okay, we haven't made a policy, and we have not been able to showcase our management of, best practices to international audience. And I mean, that is one reason we get less funding for it. And I mean, the other issue is about these, the legal issues. And as you mentioned, like Imran Khan, when he made this, bold proposal of giving, citizens to Afghan, refugees. And then you heard the, reactions from all across the society and also from the, security establishment. And I think the basic thing is we should, sign up to 1951, Geneva Convention, and it's, 1961, protocol. And also there should be more, media awareness around these issues, because Afghan refugees have been part and parcel of our, national life. We can't get them out of the country. And it is better to live with them. And of course, to make use of all their, economic entrepreneurialism and other things. and of course, I mean, document their, contribution to our economy. So I think these are, some of the comments I wanted to make.
Thank you so much. I'm Dr. Shaheen from the National Defense University. Very interesting insight shared by the panel. I'm so grateful. Invariably, the issue comes down to the giving citizenship to the Afghan refugees. I just want to really understand it a little more in terms of like few queries around that. Do we have any idea around how many Afghan refugees actually interested in Pakistan citizenship? Because if they are driven by the conflict, and this conflict situation has been there for like now 4 decades, if the situation stabilizes there and there is a more economic opportunity, nobody wants to really leave the homeland. Would they like to come back? So to get the little idea, then about there were like reports saying that at one point they were given some CNICs. What happened to that? There was some politics around that as well. So is there the fear of like there will be like politics being played around that? Because we have like pockets where demographic change affects a lot of political outcomes. So maybe there may be fear about from the economic aspect, and even in KP we came across that even the local community there have some limited reservation around that some businesses have been captured by them. But I think if you do contribute to the local economy, national economy, that should not really be ignored. Then there is also an aspect, if we start really open up like say giving citizenship to the Afghan refugee, so how about the new refugees? Will it be open-ended? So any new conflict there, situation there will be bringing more like refugees. So how Pakistan is going to deal with that? Then will that be a set up precedent to other refugees coming to Pakistan? Because generally with the rapid growth of population in Pakistan itself is becoming a huge issue, huge challenge on resources and all that, on environment itself. So on the legal side, I would like to understand what is preventing Pakistan not to really develop its own domestic law on the refugee issue and not to sign this Geneva Convention and the 1961 protocol. So what is it? Because when you look at the refugee issue in South Asia, you find similar issues, similar changes. There's no regional framework on that as well. Thank you so much.
You see, as I was saying previously, actually, since we don't have our specific law about refugees, we are not signatories to international conventions. So it's mostly political or policy towards Afghanistan, which shapes our attitude towards refugees. And when we talk about Pakistan's policy towards Afghanistan, it's well known that it's mostly decided by military establishment, by generals. It started from Ziaul Haq in 1980s, and it has continued. And the civil governments do not have much say in shaping this policy. So when Prime Minister Imran Khan declared that Pakistan should give, and we intend to give citizenship, people like me, we were in a position where we supported his suggestion, and we thought it was a sensible thing to do. Because as was previously explained by one of our colleagues here, that in 1951 Citizenship Act, there's very clear provision that every child who is born in Pakistan is eligible to Pakistani citizenship. And there are only two exceptions. First, if the parents are serving diplomats, sitting diplomats, of course, that's an exception. I mean, they're not citizens. Secondly, if the parents are formally declared as enemies of Pakistan, officially, in that case, they don't qualify to become citizens. So these are the two exceptions. Apart from that, everyone who is born. Now, this was decided in 1951, far before Afghan refugees' arrival. So it was a Pakistani law. It's on the book. It applies to everyone. But it has not been applied to Afghanistan because there are political considerations, there are policies. There are thousands of refugees, a few thousands, I must say, who have been given citizenship. I know of many of them. And they were given because they were very close to our intelligence agencies. They had sort of worked for them in Afghanistan during war, etc. So they were given citizenship. Now, others were not. As student of Pakistan's Afghan policy, I've been following this policy for the last many decades, and I've been critically following it. So I can tell you, it's these are my 2 cents. I may be wrong, but I believe that it was not done because if the citizenship was given to Afghan children who were born here, now most of these Taliban who recently captured Kabul, they would have been carrying Pakistani identity cards in their pockets. They would have been Pakistanis. And the news would be, Pakistanis have captured Kabul. So you see, so it is this aspect which has kept, I mean, the problem has not been resolved. I think, but in the long term, I think it's always important to follow law, humanitarian laws, international laws or local laws, because it gives you a sustainable solution. It gives you a long-term solution. These expediencies, you see, they can be problematic. And I think in this case, we should have a clear policy towards Afghanistan. Afghanistan is our neighbor. We should have the best of relations with Afghanistan. We should focus on geo-economic. So unfortunately, we have been bogged down in geostrategic for a very long time. I'm really concerned that a new round of conflict is starting. And we are again an outpost of Western powers. We are again local contractors, like managing these conflicts for Western powers. And it's very serious. It's not in the interest of this country and our people. So I believe we should reconsider our Afghan policy, and this Citizenship Act must be part of this. And those who want to get citizenship, or those who want to go back, they should go back. And those who want to avail this Pakistani law, they should be given the opportunity. Thank you.
I'll address the second part of your question about, has there been a survey, asking how many want to become citizens of the country? Well, there hasn't, to my knowledge, but there is anecdotal evidence, and especially, for example, the foundation working for more than 20 years in the field with the Afghan refugees, so you're actually not many want to become citizens. Most want to go back. But there are some, as Sir said, that who have become citizens, and as was said by Kashif Saab, that they're already working over here, and they're contributing to our economy, they're contributing to society, and so they need to be acknowledged and legalized, if you will. I think that is the position, at least, that I'm coming from with regard to citizen or anything. One is that citizenship is not necessarily here, but wherever is everyone's right, and because it is a legal relationship, so it's very important. Documentation is one step, was very rightly said by the audience over here, and the other is, having a very clear and coherent policy that translates our own act. There is an act, whether we like it or not, or we want to amend it or whatever, but every country, has some sort, has a policy, has an act, has space where people can become citizens. Pakistan needs that. And one of the reasons, as rightly pointed out by Afrasiab Khattak Saab, was that everything in foreign policy and many economic policy even at times is looked at with the security lens. And security is essential and critical, but we need to use other holistic lens to look at policies. So back to the question is that there's anecdotal evidence. We don't have surveys, and maybe that is another step that we need to do, but definitely it is high time in the 50th year of hosting Afghan refugees that we do, engage in the necessary documentation, the necessary policy discussion, and present that for the benefit, not just of the refugees, but really for our own communities. I think certain narrative building takes place. I would also very briefly like to touch upon Punjab or whatever. So even in Pukhtunkhwa, I wonder if most of you know, I think Khattak Saab knows that those of us who are Pashto speaking, we were, and even Allama Iqbal used to call us Afghans. That is but when nation states after Second World War were developed, and Afghanistan did not just have a Pashtun or Pushtun population, but also people from Central Asia became citizens, and Dari or Farsi speaking people also. So then those people, this is a modern term, that is now Afghanistan. But because the nation states have been created artificially in a way, and then definitions of nations are different. Some people define it by ethnicity. I think in our language, in many languages, they still say hum ek qaum hai, jo Pushtun qaum hai, ya Punjab ka qaum hai. When I've been to India before, not now, don't. So Punjab, Punjab on this side and that side, they felt more as one qaum or one nation. Another thing I would like to place over here very quickly is that for me, I find it ironic that hum itna reluctant hai accepting people of different cultural backgrounds or ethnicities. Pakistan ek itna khubsurat mulk hai with such a diversity of ethnicities and cultures. Sirf GB province mein 7 zabane hai. Majority of our population, I feel, or a large, I don't know the exact statistic, but wo refugees hain, kafi log Pakistan mein. Koi yahan pure blood nahi hai. तो थोड़ा सा हमने फिर फोकस देना है अपने रेफ्यूजी पॉलिसी पे. शुक्रिया.
Thank you, ma'am. Sorry, a quick comment. आपकी बात पे most Afghans we've met, they don't want citizenship. They just want some form of documentation ताकि उनके बच्चे health education को access कर सकें. फिलहाल that's their demand initially. Ma'am पहले उन्होंने हाथ खड़े किया था, पहले उनसे कहते हैं if you don't mind. That gentleman in the suit, जी आप please इनको दे दीजिए. Ma'am, then we'll come to you. उन्होंने पहले हाथ खड़े किया था.
Thank you very much. You have given us a very comprehensive understanding on the refugees created by the conflicts in Afghanistan and conflicts in the KPK. So now my focus is conflicts are creating the refugees, and it is a big challenge to the state policymaker and even the society and peace. So now another dimension that is evolving, that is a climate change. Climate change is also creating internally displaced people, because recently it has affected most part of the Balochistan and Sindh. So people are going to for livelihood from Balochistan to Sindh to Karachi. So our ethnic divisions are so wide that even people based in Karachi are thinking challenges that these people will come, and then when they will settle, they will challenge the sources of livelihood. So my point is, any thinking on the part of the stakeholder dealing with the refugees, IDPs, they are thinking because following a challenge of internally displaced persons in Pakistan. Because if conflict can be settled down, but the climate cannot be settled down immediately. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. मेरा नाम डॉक्टर मेहर ताहिर रोगानी है एंड बैकग्राउंड डॉक्टर का है और आई एम सेनेटर दीज डेज. मैं तो एक पोजीशन में नहीं हूँ कि सजेशन दे सकूं, लेकिन कमेंट्स जो आप लोगों ने बातें की उस दो लाइक कमेंट्स दैट. नंबर वन, आप सॉरी आई एम लेट आई हूँ, नाम नहीं वो के लास्ट फ्रॉम द रोस्टम. आपने कहा कि लाइक यू नो आइदर फैसलाबाद और समवेयर यू सेड मुल्तान, आई एम फॉरगेटिंग, एनीवे जहां से आप हैं, आप कह रहे हैं कि इनकी बिकॉज ऑफ माइनॉरिटी इनकी सोशल वो जो है नेटवर्क इतना स्ट्रांग है कि वो you didn't say they don't allow, but indirect words मैंने जो मतलब लिया है आपसे ये लिया है कि sort of ये बाकी लोगों को allow नहीं करते हैं उसमें. I will sorry not totally agree with you. I won't say I disagree, but I won't totally agree with you. अफगान पीपल जो हैं, जो अफगानिस्तान वाले हैं, हम भी अफगान हैं लेकिन हम पाकिस्तानी अफगान हैं, उनके जो है sort of you know सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट भी बहुत ज्यादा है, लेकिन एट द सेम टाइम वो कोई भी काम करते हैं. आई रिमेम्बर अफरसियाब खटक विल बेयर में आउट दानिशाबाद में हम घर बना रहे थे. ऑनेस्टली डॉक्टर्स जो थे, ये मैं 80s की डॉक्टर्स एंड इंजीनियर्स, वो ब्रिक्स उठा रहे थे, मिट्टी काम कर रहे थे हमारे घर में. हमारा करेगा कोई? हम खुद को अफगान कहते हैं. हमारे जो इंजीनियर और डॉक्टर है, मैं भूख से मर जाऊंगी लेकिन मैं कहूंगी नहीं. तो ये इनकी आई डोंट नो, इसको खुददारी भी है उनकी और उनकी पावर भी है. हमारा केपी में, पेशावर में सारा कारखाना उन्होंने लिया. ये नहीं कि वी कांट कम्पीट विद देम, गॉड गिफ्टेड है वो. तो ये बात आप तो रिसर्चर है, मैं नहीं हूँ, लेकिन इस बात पे मैं नहीं एग्री करूंगी. नंबर वन. नंबर टू, इन्होंने कहा कि सॉरी आई एम नॉट डिडंट या यू सेड के many will not like to like sort of will vote or will say for that I want to become a Pakistani. अगर हम पूछें, maybe you are right, लेकिन I tell you in these 30 years so many intermarriages जो कि मैं जानती हूँ, मेरी friends हैं, उन्होंने इतने इंटरमैरेजेस किए. हम एनेक्डोटल बात नहीं कर सकते, हमने रिसर्च करने के कितने बातें क्या माए. एंड आई मैं जो बात करती हूँ, आई एम श्योर कि जो अर्ली 70s या 80s या 90s में थे, वहां आप कह सकते थे कि many of the Afghans would not like to go back, but if you do a research now these days, many would like to stay in Pakistan because of their integration के intermarriages हमारे केपी में क्यों हुए हैं. ये मेरे comments हैं और suggestion तो researchers के लिए. Thank you very much.
Letting me to ask some question. My name is Dr. Tariq Mahmood, and I am CEO of Center for Research, Innovation and Policy. My question is to Mr. Afrasiab. As a seasoned and experienced politician, I think he has been in the politics for the last 30 or 40 years, something like that. Correct me if I am wrong, please. My question is, as a supreme body, as a supreme lawmaking body, why the parliamentarians failed to make some basic policies and relevant laws to implement those policies, laws and acts to tackle these major issues related to the Afghan refugees. As one side, it's a basic humanitarian issue. On the other side, It deals with our national security and our social issues and other relevant issues. My question is that from Afrasiab sir.
Thank you very much. It's a very good question. Unfortunately, we have, as you know very well, we have a hybrid system after General Ziaul Haq's martial law. We don't have real genuine democracy. We don't have a full-fledged constitutional system. It's a controlled democracy in which certain policies are sort of monopolized by the establishment. And Afghan issue is one of them. Parliament, we have raised this in Parliament a number of times. At times, sometimes the political parties do not have numbers for legislation. At other times, they don't have priorities. But I agree with you. I mean, the Parliament should assert itself, and Parliament should guide the country. But as I already said, we do have laws, but then sometimes those laws are flouted because the civil government do not have the will or do not have the political strength to implement those laws. So that is part of our general problem of democracy in this country. But I think your suggestion is relevant, and I think we must go for legislation, because we have millions of refugees staying here for decades without any law. I mean, this is really, this should not be acceptable. Because how can you deal with millions of people without any law? And it's particularly serious because we are not signatory to international conventions also. So it's total legal vacuum. That's what is leading to this situation where refugees are dealt by local authorities according to what they like or dislike. So I think the Parliament, political parties must take it as a serious issue, and it should become part of our international or national conversation and agenda of priorities.
Any more questions from the audience? Lady there, then the Sahab jo kone mein phir aap pe aate hain. 1, 2, 3. That's how we'll go. And kindly keep it short. Because abhi session ka time is over, so we'll just.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, thank you so much. It's an honor for us to be here among such great, informative panel members. My question is from the panel members that what is the current strategy of Pakistan towards refugees? क्योंकि मेरे ख्याल में मुझे ऐसा लगता है, in my opinion, कि पाकिस्तान में इस वक्त overpopulation is also one of the biggest issue. जहाँ पे हम देखते हैं कि we are welcoming toward other refugees and all other people, but in Pakistan I think we are facing so many issues because of overpopulation. So how Pakistan is dealing with this situation, और क्या वो ऐसी strategies बना रहे हैं? Are they welcoming toward refugees still, या फिर अब अगर कोई उनकी planning change?
I'll ask Safia. Short answer is we have no strategy, but Safia will elaborate.
जी, overpopulation आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा. It's a huge problem in Pakistan, but frankly, these people are already living here. That's our point. That you have 2-3 million people, and not just Afghans. As I'm saying, there are Bangladeshis, there are Burmese in Karachi. Our research focuses on Afghans, but there are many others. They're living in the country. They're working. They're trying to access facilities. They're just not counted. So yes, there's overpopulation, but having a large undocumented population is not a good idea for a number of reasons.
Last 2 questions, please. The gentleman in the back, and then aap, please. वो बिल्कुल end में जो है, फिर then you. Then we'll end the session, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Abid Khan, and I am from International Islamic University and doing my bachelor in economics. Sir, I think helping someone on humanitarian basis with certain limitation make no sense. And we Pakistani are doing the same. Like, sir, हम just cricket का एक example ले ले सर, हमारा अफगान और पाकिस्तान का जब cricket match हो जाता है तो हमारे नेशनल टीवी पे इतना हार्श स्टेटमेंट आते हैं कि मतलब ये हमारे मुल्क में रहते हैं और हमें जो है ना जुमले घुसाते हैं इस तरह का। तो सर उसको हम इसके रीजन क्या है और इसको हम कैसे हल कर सकते हैं?
उनका भी क्वेश्चन ले लेते हैं प्लीज, आप भी, then we'll answer them together.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ala Shan. I'm a graduate from Quaid-e-Azam University. My question is that is the current government of Afghanistan and Pakistan in any understanding for the refugees problem in Pakistan, or and the follow-up question for this is that does these plannings and policies by the governments change as the government change as well, or does these policies are for the longer time? Thank you.
जी, ये जो क्रिकेट वाला सवाल था, इसके बारे में मेरी गुजारिश ये है कि मैंने शुरू में कहा जैसे प्रॉब्लम ये है कि पाकिस्तान की अफगान पॉलिसी में बहुत बड़ा नुक्स जो है वो ये है कि बाकी दुनिया में जैसे मसलन चीन पाकिस्तान का दोस्त है, पाकिस्तान में कोई चीन के साथ दोस्ती का मुखालिफ नहीं है, इसलिए कि चीन पाकिस्तान को दोस्त समझता है। चीन ने ये नहीं किया कि मैं फलां पार्टी का दोस्त हूँ, चीन ने ये नहीं कहा कि मैं फलां ग्रुप का या फलां सूबे का दोस्त हूँ, वो कहते हैं पाकिस्तान का दोस्त हूँ। तो सारे पाकिस्तानी भी उसको दोस्त समझते हैं। हमारे यहाँ प्रॉब्लम ये है अफगान पॉलिसी में कि हमने पहले गुलबदीन इख्तियार हमारे लाई थे, फिर उसको हमने डिच किया, फिर तालिबान हमारे लाई हैं। तालिबान एक 2 लाख लोग होंगे तो 35 मिलियन अफगान की रिप्रेजेंटेशन नहीं करते और कोई वहाँ इलेक्शन भी नहीं हुए। तो गुजारिश ये कि जो अफगानों में ये एक परसेप्शन है और ये परसेप्शन शायद इसमें कोई वजन होगा या कुछ कम वजन होगा, लेकिन हकीकत ये कि वो समझते हैं कि जो वहाँ लड़ाई हो रही है उसमें पाकिस्तान का बड़ा हाथ है, क्योंकि और उसकी वजह ये है कि चूंकि पाकिस्तान किसी ग्रुप के साथ मुंसलिक होके वहाँ पे सियासत करता है तो उस ग्रुप के जो मुखालिफ हैं वो पाकिस्तान को अपना मुखालिफ समझते हैं। ये बहुत अहम बात है। और ये जो रिसेंट लड़ाई की आप बात करते हैं, चूंकि तालिबान वहाँ पे इक़्तिदार में आए हैं और तालिबान ने आने के बाद ऐसे काम किए, उन्होंने मतलब अपना कौमी झंडा उतार फेंका है, उन्होंने अपने कौमी तराने पर पाबंदी लगाई है, उन्होंने अपने सारे जो स्टेट सिम्टम्स थे उन सबको, तो अफगान समझते हैं कि ये उनके ऊपर पाकिस्तान ने मुसलत किया है। तो जो तालिबान के साथ उनका झगड़ा है उसको एक तरह से एक्सटर्नलाइज वो करते हैं पाकिस्तान के साथ। तो ये मैं समझता हूँ कि हमें थोड़ा सा, जैसे मैंने पहले अर्ज किया था, वी शुड बिफ्रेंड अफगानिस्तान एज नेशन, वी शुड बिफ्रेंड अफगानिस्तान एज कंट्री, जैसे चीन पाकिस्तान के साथ करता है। मैं बार बार हमेशा यहाँ कहता रहा हूँ कि लेट्स बिफ्रेंड द होल कंट्री rather than befriending a certain group.
जी, मैं जल्दी से आखिरी सवाल का जवाब दे दूं। No, the government of Pakistan and Afghanistan don't have an agreement on refugees, and they never have had, because actually no government in Afghanistan wants to admit that. This dates from the 1980s. They've never wanted to admit that people have left Afghanistan and settled in Pakistan. So this 3 million figure of Afghan refugees is entirely disputed in Afghanistan. They say कि नहीं, इतने नहीं गए थे. And the same thing is happening now. Right now, Pakistan is one reason that we think that Pakistan is not willing to continue with the refugee status is also because they do not want to offend the government in Afghanistan. They don't want to say that since the Taliban have come into power, another 500,000 have crossed over. You know, this is a political issue. So yes, there's no agreement on how to deal with refugees. There's only an agreement, tacit agreement between the government of Pakistan and Afghanistan that Afghan citizens living in Pakistan should have basic services, etc., but there's nothing formally.
Thank you so much everyone for coming. We'll end the session here. Thank you to all the panelists, Afraz Sahab, Aisha, Salik Saab, Sophia, thank you for coming. And, please.